Well, what's up everybody, this is RJ99, and today we're going to be talking about primarily the tech tree and ships and what races you can choose from when you start a new character. Now the game has numerous factions that have ships, as you can see. These first four are known as the Four Empires. These four groups actually rule the bulk of NPC space. You have the Minmatar Empire, the Caldari State, the Galente Federation, and the Minmatar Republic. As an alpha clone, your ability to fly ships will be limited to your race of origin. Paid subscribers can buy we can buy whatever skill books we want and fly from there. For example, this is a Caldari character, but as you can see, I can fly Amar ships, I can fly Galente ships, etc., etc. So it's important to understand each nation has their own flavor of what particular weapons they use, what they bulk up their hit points on their ships. Their fighting styles are all very different. And we'll just do them in order here. We got first off the Amar. The Amar are, well, their ships are kind of slow and majestic. They tend to emphasize armor HP over speed, so they tank in the armor layer, obviously. They use lasers as their weapon system, which has benefits and drawbacks. The Amar energy weapons do not use ammunition per se. They use frequency crystals. As you can see, I have, instead of loading, for example, rounds like this Macarial, which actually shoots artillery, it has individual shots. This Apocalypse uses lasers, and in order to change the ranges of your lasers and alter the characteristics, you load in specific frequency crystals. As you can see, I have some Scorch, which are a Tech 2 pulse laser crystal, and I have multi-frequency, which is a close-up frequency crystal. It just changes the ranges, and the further away your lasers can hit, the more EM damage they do and the less thermal damage they do. The same is true of, the opposite is true of the Imperial Navy multi-frequency. You do more thermal damage up close and less EM damage. Now, regular frequency crystals under normal circumstances will not break. Conventional, like regular multi-frequency, which just doesn't have that little tag on the corner, they never break. They just use capacitor, and that's their drawback. They use a lot of capacitor. Energy weapons do. But there's no charges, as long as these crystals don't break, which only the faction and the Tech 2 ones break, you're generally fine. just have to make sure that you have capacitor to keep shooting. They also use certain ships of theirs use drones. An example of that would be this cruiser, the Arbitrator. It has a small drone bay, or a smallish drone bay. You can see it can support 3 flights of medium drones and have 1 flight of medium drones out. So decent. It's not as they're not as good as the Galente. The Galente are by far the best with drones, but the Amar make a good effort to have drones as a strong secondary on some of their ships. Other than that, they tend, like I said, they tend to tank in the armor layer. So their repair ships, for example, this Inquisitor, they emphasize armor repairs because they're an armor-based nation. Same with their support cruiser, the Augurer. In its Tech 2 version, the Augurer, of course, also does capacitor transfer, so you can send energy from one ship to another. Now, you won't be able to use the stuff labeled 2 or 3 up here, so I don't need to worry about it too much. They do have some very fast fighters. They do have a few skirmish fighters that are very quick. For example, the Imperial Navy Slicer and the Executioner can also be fairly fast. But they tend to emphasize armor more than raw speed in their fighting style. They're kind of the, you could say the old school, like naval tradition of, the full broadside type of deal. That's their shtick. They do get decent optimal range with laser weapons, but you have very little fall off. So once you hit your optimal range, if you're trying to chase somebody, they can really easily get away from you because your fall off range isn't that big. As I said, some people play Amar. They do decent EM and thermal damage, so they're best suited to fighting, of course, their own space pirates, namely the Sancha and the Blood Raiders, who use Amar ships. Capacitor skills with these things are essential, as are very good gunnery skills, especially for things like tracking and capacitor usage, because these things can drain you dry if you're not careful. But you should also note that armor has to be repaired, either by a repair module or by using a repair service at a station. It does not regenerate on its own. That's one of the downsides of armor in armor modules. You tend to be slower and does not regenerate on its own. And that is a little bit of a contradiction compared to the Caldari State. The Caldari State ships tend to be lighter and a little faster. They emphasize defense in the shield layer, which is the outer layer of the hit point wheel. There's upsides and downsides to this equation. The upside is because shields are energy, they don't really add weight to your ship like armor does. If you fit armor plates to, say, your Mar battleship, for instance, you weigh down the vessel and it becomes a little slower. The shields don't do that. However, because shields are energy and generate electronic signature, shield ships have to deal with an expanded electronic footprint, which is known as the signature radius. The bigger the signature radius of your ship, the easier it is for enemy sensors to target lock you, and the easier it is for enemy guns to acquire a firing solution, making you easier to hit. In relation to a ship of an armor ship of similar size. Say, for example, you're in a frigate. See this Merlin. You can go into the information here, down here, and you can see the signature radius of the ship is 39 meters. Now we pull up Punisher, which is the Mar ship of the same type, 37 meters. So it's actually considered a larger ship by 2 meters, and this is unfit. If you fit shield extenders to this Merlin to give it more health, signature radius will go up even more. Using certain propulsion modules like micro warp drives also vastly increases your electronic footprint. So it's something to be mindful of when using high-speed modules like that. It's one of the balancing factors of a high-speed unit like the micro warp drive. Now this is more of a concern for small ships, because one of the biggest defenses of small ships against large ships is their small signature. Larger ships, you're going to get hit anyway. You don't really care. A battleship doesn't really care about its signature radius because it's so huge it's going to get hit anyway, no matter what you do. Because it's more than likely going to be engaging stuff smaller than itself. Pretty hard for them not to miss. But the Caldari have hybrid turrets, particularly railguns. They like using railguns a lot, mainly because of the distance factor. They also prefer missiles. They are a heavily missile-oriented weapon system. For the Caldari, guns are more secondary than missiles. You can see they have, for example, the dedicated missile ship here on the Kestrel. They have a missile destroyer, the Corax. They have the Caracal, which is a missile cruiser. And then if you ever move up to the higher ranks, for battle cruisers, for example, you have the Drake, which used to be a very ubiquitous missile ship. There was a time when it was Drake everything. Fortunately, new staff came to work at CCP, and they shook things up because Drakes, and more Drakes is not very interesting gameplay. Then at the top of the tree for missile ships, we have the Raven. The mission runner's ship of choice. A lot of level 4 mission runners swear by their Ravens, or the Tech 2 versions of the Raven, like the Golem. But the ships are faster. The trade-off comes in fitting, because certain modules use certain slots, and I'll demonstrate on my current ship. You can tell a ship is meant to tank. You can usually tell if a tank is meant for shield or armor, because it'll have more of a certain slot. This is a shield tanking ship. It has more mid slots to fit shield modules. Armor modules tend to go down here in the low slots. An example of that would be this Apocalypse. As you can see, now you see these guns are shaded out. That's because I technically don't have the skills to run them yet. This is a showpiece for an event that's coming up here in a few days. By the time that comes around, I'll have the requisite skills trained to be able to use the guns. But for now, it just illustrates a good point. You see there's armor modules down here in the low slots. The trade-off is, as you can see, there's also damage modules down here. The low slots tend to be where your damage improvement items are. And things like electronic warfare and support tend to be in the middle slots. So it's always a trade-off as to, a shield tanking ship. Do you want to sacrifice shield tanking slots to fit something to hold down an enemy? And the same thing goes for armor. Do you want to lower your damage potential to trade for more damage potential, or more tanking potential? So you have to choose defense over offense in both these situations. So it's something to keep in mind when you're fitting a ship. It's also important to notice that every ship has a purpose, and it has individual bonuses to help it fulfill that purpose. For example, this Osprey is a shield repair ship. It is not meant to equip weapons and engage in a fight. It has no bonuses for fighting. It has a bonus for providing repairs for someone else, specifically shield repairs for someone else who is fighting. So you wouldn't strap guns to this, go out and fight, and expect to get anywhere. If you want to fight, you say, well, alright, I'm a Caldari pilot. Do I want to use guns or missiles? If you want to use missiles, you get a caracal. And you learn the appropriate weapon systems. That's the other thing you have to remember, that weapon systems have specific bonuses. Don't put railguns on this caracal. It doesn't get bonuses. Use the strengths of the ship to your advantage. And the same goes for the MOA. You wouldn't put missile launchers or lasers or guns, or projectiles, for example, with the Minmatar use on a MOA, because it doesn't get a bonus for that. It's a bonus for these. Also, you want to see that some vehicles also get a bonus to certain resist types. So you wouldn't armor tank a MOA because you're not capitalizing on the shield bonus. Things like that. And once you learn, you just go through here and see what ships are highlighted and see what you can fly and see what the bonuses are. If you want something a little smaller, a little faster, but you like missiles, you go for a Kestrel. Maybe you need a little more oomph. You move up to a Corax. And there are tons of websites and places that you can get fits for any ship imaginable. You can also see the fits that people do badly and learn from their mistakes. That's the best teacher, someone else's mistakes, because then it doesn't cost you anything. But the Caldari, they can be set up to do a distance striking and running, moving away, kiting. They're decent enough. I like to fly a fair bit of Caldari. Then we have the Galente Federation. I imagine this one's going to be fairly popular. The Galente are, well, they're kind of interesting. They're a brawling armor drone support doctrine. They tend to emphasize hybrid. They use hybrid weapons as the Caldari do, but they emphasize the blasters, the short-range hybrid weapon. And now, blasters are very powerful. As a veteran, as a guy who has a veteran suicide ganker, I can say blasters are very powerful. They can do a lot of damage if they get close. Especially Tech 2 blasters with Tech 2 ammo. They hurt a lot. They're not as slow as the Amar. The Amar are kind of ponderous. Their ships are very ponderous and bulky. They do big broadsides. They have huge distance with their beam lasers. They can do some close-up work with their pulse lasers. The Galente are kind of the opposite. They're a little faster. They want to close with the enemy to get their blasters to bear because their blasters have hideously low range. And their drones are a strong secondary weapon system that can harry the enemy while the gunship closes in. And that's the general tactic typically for dealing with the Caldari and their fighting, the Galente and their fighting style. They do tank in the armor layer like the Amar. They do also have a fair number of hull hit points. They actually, I believe when they originally started the game, that they were initially designed to kind of be a hull tanking race. And with some, and I say some, Galente ships, you can kind of sort of do that, but it's very, very dangerous. And you won't know your tank's holding up because once you hit zero structure, you're dead. Plus, the hull does not have the active modules that shield and armor do, so most tend to stick to tanking in their armor layer. Now these guys, Like I said, blasters can be positively devastating if they get close. But fighting a drone ship like this Vexor, you don't need to really get close to the enemy. You can launch your drones at a safe distance and have them do the dirty work. And as you can see, bonus to drone hit points and damage. A lot of Galente ships get these kind of bonuses. You know, in a venture, your drones are little pinpricks. You get some good SP, get yourself in a Galente ship. That little hobgoblin just got a lot more dangerous. So much so that ships like the Vexor and its bigger brother, the Ishtar, can use drones exclusively as a weapon system. The same can also be said of ships like, as you can see, the Myrmidon, and if you're feeling really frisky, the big brother, the Dominics. My CEO swears by his Dominics, the space potato. It doesn't look like much, but the drones on a Dominics can tear things apart. I've engaged in many a fleet battle with the Dominics, and it was fun. It was very fun. All right. The main thing to remember is that they can be more mobile, but they cannot really hold up to someone really running away from them. So they're good for drones, and that's what most people choose them for. Then we have the Minmatar Republic. These guys have a long and convoluted story. They were a slave race to the Amar, who are kind of like semi-religious nut jobs who basically believe it is their divine right to enslave the entire universe, until they figured out that most of the universe can shoot back. They did manage to enslave a great deal of people from the Minmatar Republic at the time. However, the Minmatar are far more ingenious than what on the outside it seems like their technology is kind of ramshackle, but kind of like the orcs in Warhammer 40k. Just because it doesn't look pretty doesn't mean it doesn't work, at least in their hands. And they proceeded with the help of the Jovians, who are were kind of an all-powerful race that just kind of watched. They sort of distracted the Amarians long enough for the Minmatar to rebel and take back a lot of their space, and now they have an empire of their own. And of course the two hate each other because a lot of Minmatar are still in captivity. So a lot of people play the abolitionist angle, I guess, with the Minmatar. Their ships do not look, too aesthetically pleasing. Probably this is one of the most iconic ships Eve has, and it's a Minmatar ship. This is the Rifter. There was a time when this pretty much was the low-end frigate. If you wanted to do anything, period, on the low end, you flew a Rifter. Times have changed, but it's still a very iconic ship. And this design philosophy, the earthy, wingtips and all this good stuff, solar sails, it makes its appearance on a lot of situations, like, for example, the Vagabond, bellicose. You can see that just the general design theme is the same. Now the Minmatar are very, I would say they're kind of have an identity crisis. They're actually very good at a lot. The primary weapon system is, of course, projectile turrets. Standard guns, basically the kind that we have here in the real world, just bigger. The thing about the Minmatar is, whereas most other weapon systems are locked to a damage type, for example, lasers will always do some version of EM damage or thermal damage, or a little bit of both. Blasters and railguns will always do a little bit of, always do some kinetic, some thermal. Drones will always do the parent damage of their race, so if you use Galente drones, they're going to use thermal damage. Projectiles are the only other weapon system other than missiles that can vary its damage type. Now, I'll show you an example. For example, I take a Minmatar ship out. We'll say I just take out a Rifter for this example. So just a couple of small autocannons, and I encounter an Amarian ship, say an Amarian NPC, and I want to blow it up. Well, Amarian ships are weak to EMP damage, so I load in my EMP ammo, because it does, as you can see, a little bit of explosive and kinetic, just by virtue of, I shot something at you, and B, it blew up, but the warhead has an EMP burst in it, so it does EM damage on impact. So I take him down. Well, while I'm fighting that guy, someone else shows up, say a Minmatar NPC. Well, Minmatar NPCs are vulnerable to explosive and kinetic, but they're really strong against EMP. So I right-click my guns, and I load in fusion ammo. As you can see, fusion does, this base does 10 base damage, plus 2 for the kinetic, for the actual impact of the round. So from literally right-clicking and having some different charges in my cargo bay, I just changed my damage profile inside of 15 seconds. So it's very valuable and makes them very versatile. So it's not always about the super high-tech stuff in this game. Now they are balanced as far as speed, shield, and armor. Some ships in the Minmatar group can actually tank either way. For example, the Rupture. This ship can actually tank, because it's got, 4 mids, or you can go 5 lows. You can actually fit either a decent armor tank, a damage control, maybe a plate, things like that. And the same can be said for the medium slots. I could fit a shield hardener, a shield extender and work on it that way. And some are just meant to just go fast. An emphasis on that would be the stabber, which can move very, very quickly, or its big brother, the vagabond. So there's a lot of versatility with the Minmatar. They're not so stolid and stuck in their ways. They do have a few missile ships. They tend to be kind of bad. For example, the Breacher can use missiles. The Talwar can use missiles. The Bellicose can sort of use missiles, but not really well. You got the Cyclone, and then you got the Typhoon. So you can do missiles with the Minmatar, but they don't tend to do very well with missiles versus the Caldari. They're a little too confused for their own good. But as far as a jack of all trades, the Minmatar are halfway decent. But there's a big skill gap there because they do a lot of things, but they don't do any of them like super well, sadly. It's just kind of the way it goes. Now the other groups you see here are all side factions. You can't join these factions, but they do produce ships that are capsule compliant. One of the first factions you'll encounter is ORE, Outer Ring Excavations. These guys are responsible for bringing mining as a whole to a whole new level in New Eden. Now, 99.9% of the ships in this tree are industrial based. Like there's literally 1, 2 that do not require anything regarding industry at all. First is the Noctis. This is a ship that emphasizes the ability to salvage, to perform salvage operations in deep space. So think an industrial ship with high slots for tractor beams and salvagers. It's got a little bit of cargo space, but not a lot. And you've got the Bowhead, which is essentially a freighter. It is a freighter, but instead of a huge cargo bay, which is what the regular Empire freighters are, basically a big cargo bay with an engine and cockpit strapped on it, the Bowhead is a big ship maintenance array with an engine strapped onto it, which means it can haul assembled ships and take them from one place to another. The only ship in the game that can travel through high security space that's capable of doing this. More advanced capital ships, for example the Carrier in the regular Empire nations can do it, but those ships can't enter and leave high sec. They have to stay in low and null security. But for the main thing that new players will encounter is this little ship right here, the Venture, the ubiquitous mining frigate. If you're going to mine at any time in your Eve career, you will be using this Venture. It's a small little ship. It has a very good size ore hold. It holds 3,000 cubic meters, which is similar to an industrial of similar size. Plus it fills up fairly decently once you've got the skills. Now fitting one of these, you only have you have 3 high power slots, but you only have 2 turret slots. So there's a few trade-offs to consider. you will always need some kind of defensive weapon to defend yourself against pirate rats. Because even the most minor pirate rat in a belt can harm a venture. So you'll always want to, you either want to mount a gun and only fit one mining laser, or you want to learn how to use drones, because the venture does have, as you can see, a drone bay capable of fitting 2 light drones, which is more than enough to take care of most minor rats in, let's say, the rookie systems in the immediate surroundings. You can start rolling down to like a 0.5 with these, you might get your drones blown up. And you probably go into low sec, you're probably going to get murdered by those rats, because they tend to spawn in battle cruisers and battleships. Big things, bad things that will eat your venture for breakfast. Another thing to remember, this ship has a bonus to warp core strength, so it's very hard for an enemy to warp scramble you, because you have to, it takes 3 points of core scrambling to hold you down. So the minute someone tries, you just warp away. And unless they've got 3 dudes with them, 2 or 3 dudes with them, they're not going to be able to catch you. And you can upgrade to the Tech 2 mining frigates. This one mines ice. This one mines, the Endurance mines ice, and then you have the Prospect, which is a cloaking miner. Alpha players won't be able to use these, unfortunately. Same with the mining barge and their big brother, the Exhumer. This is more for high-end resource gathering. Then we have support ships for mining. Once again, you'll have to be a paid subscriber, and these take a lot of skill points to fly. My main could actually fly both of these for a while. But the Venture is all you really need to worry about here. This is the cornerstone of mining as a new player. If you get 2 of these, I think, during the newbie missions, they only cost like $500,000. They're pretty cheap. They're not even 273,000. So these other items, these are all pirate faction. Well, we say they're pirates, except for these gals. They live in the area outside of low security, for the most part. They tend to have this thing about rejecting other people's authority. The exception of this would be the sisters. You may run into the sisters in high security, so I'll cover them. The sisters are, how should I put this? The Sisters of Eve are a humanitarian organization. Think of them as a cross between the International Red Cross and the Salvation Army. They have the religious overtones that the Salvation Army has. They do have the genuine humanitarian needs. You know, they do try and address that, similar to the International Red Cross. But they kind of have their own agenda too. So their ships tend to focus more on discovery. And that's, for example, the Astero, Stratios, and the Nestor. Now the conversions here, you see these Galente and Amar come together. This is because the pirate faction ships actually require skill in 2 different wings of command. So, for example, like this, like my Mercurial, I have Minmatar battleship and I have Galente battleship to fly the Macarial. And each, as you can see, each skill provides its own bonus. And each pirate faction has their own shtick, a rule that they break. For example, with the Garistas, their ships, all of their ships have they can only support a couple of drones at a time from their drone bay, but when they have them out, they are ridiculously powerful. So in this example, 300% bonus to combat drones, to light combat drones. So you pull out 2 drones in this thing, and they're as effective as 6 drones, depending on your skills. So yeah, they basically feed their drones PCP. Then we have Sanchez Nation. Their bonus is a little bit crazy. They get a big bonus to Afterburner. So their afterburning ships are basically twice as fast as anyone else's, which is handy in a fight, especially with a ship that's something can be as fragile as theirs. Speed is a big deal for the Sancha. Then we have one of my favorites, the Blood Raiders. That's these guys, and I'll show you. They're actually they're an Amarian death cult. And they have this thing for blood. And they like getting it on everything, everywhere. They seem to think that by drinking blood it makes them pure. And of course, they prefer the blood of capsule pilots, because that's supposed to be the purest blood of all. So yeah, there's a bunch of guys who like to put blood all over their ships that want to have you over for dinner. They live down in Delve, down in the southwest corner of the map. They have a few stations down there. Their ability revolves around the use of their electronic warfare, which is energy neutralizing. They literally suck the blood, the capacitor, out of enemy ships. And they get bonuses to those types of items. And they can use it to replenish their own reserves. Regardless, normally the energy vampires are balanced, so that if I'm neutralizing energy from you, I don't actually gain energy from you unless my capacitor is lower than yours. It's kind of a fluid balance type of thing if you think about it. These guys ignore that rule. They will always gain capacitor from you regardless of the state of their own capacitor. You could be almost empty, they could be nearly full, they'll still get that last little drop out of you. Pair this in addition with their ability to remotely slow enemies with stasis webifiers, makes these guys dangerous. Like a spider trapping people in a web. You don't want to get close to these things, because they will web you, and then they will drain you dry, and then you'll be dead. And we have the Angel Cartel. This is a Minmatar, primarily, crime syndicate that lives out in Curse in the Heaven constellation. These guys, their rule-breaking ability is that their ships warp faster than they should for the ship of their size. So their emphasis is on warp speed. They're also fairly quick, and the Macarial especially has a lot of mass to it, so it can be pretty devastating. Then we have the Serpentis. The Serpentis are kind of game-breaking in that their stasis webifiers are very, very effective. Instead of slowing someone down, say 50% when they get hit with one of these, their stasis webifiers can go up to 90%, which means your little fast kitey ship just became a sitting duck. So they're definitely something you want to keep a distance from, and those who know how to play the Serpentis do it pretty well. So yeah, of course we have the Sisters, which we already covered. We have Mordu's Legion. These guys specialize in long-distance skirmish warfare. Their game-breaking ability is that they have missiles that fly really quickly, but they don't fly nearly as long. So the fuel mixture on their missiles is basically more potent. It'll get to the target faster, and they can hold down targets from further away than your typical ship. So they kind of play that long-range, fire support skirmish type of role. And they can just, as long as they can keep the distance advantage, they can just hold somebody down and tear them apart. A lot of people like to use, for example, the Garmer and the Orthrus. They like to soup themselves up with all manner of boosts and implants and whatnot, and fly around and like to show off and separate people, blow them up, that kind of thing, just harass bigger fleets. But you get one of these guys in a stand-up fight, they ain't got a chance. These ships are too fragile for that, which is why they're more the domain of the flighty runaway types, and why I don't fly them. But that should do it. Like I said, the 4 races they're varied enough that people will have a good choice, but it's more important that you choose one that kind of fits your play style. Now, me personally, I would recommend probably overall, because you can make multiple characters. They're going to be capped at 5 million skill points, which isn't that much. You can make 3 of the 4 on one account and just jump between them depending on what you feel like doing. So my first bet initially would be Galente, just because they have a pretty good variety, plus the drone skills give you more flexibility. And if you decide you wanted to go, full sub, it's an easy matter to learn all the other skills for the other races. But Galente will also get you access to Galente factional warfare, and they have a very organized militia. Not that I don't have friends who do a podcast with, and shout out to Astarothi and Men, and nudge nudge. Later on might be recruiting. Anyway, that'll do it for this episode. I'm Original99, and I'll see you next time.